We'll look at that story in a bit more detail, because joining me right now to look through the papers is Jack Rowlett, a campaigner with the pro-housing group Priced Out and a political commentator with Young Voices. A very good morning to you, Jack.
Good morning.
Talk me through your perspective on this, the cancellation of the chairman, Zahawi, because he was careless but also made many mistakes, it reveals. And the Telegraph are saying, look, he's been sacked without a fair hearing. Some of his allies make that case. Does that hold any water with you?
I think the problem here is the extent of the breaches of the ministerial code. We know that the independent advisor on ethics has found 7 breaches. And perhaps if it was one breach and it was a relatively small one, maybe Zahawi's claim that he hasn't had a fair hearing, that it's all a big misunderstanding, that it was all just a mistake, might hold some weight. But actually, it's so blatant. The ministerial code has been breached so many times, and it's been breached repeatedly over a period of time as well. He's repeatedly failed to inform the people he's supposed to inform about that investigation by HMRC into his taxes. And we also know as well that he's been threatening legal action against journalists who try and investigate these issues as well. So I don't have an enormous amount of sympathy for him. I think what's most interesting about this issue is the contrast between Rishi Sunak's approach and Boris Johnson's approach. You know, Rishi Sunak has taken the time to allow this to be investigated and then has acted swiftly once that investigation is concluded, whereas under Boris Johnson, we would regularly see the kind of findings of investigations into breaches of the ministerial code simply ignored. But I think there is a question over, despite the fact that Rishi Sunak has now acted on it, should he have acted sooner? And should he have known sooner that there was a problem here? And what did he know earlier? You know, was he asking these questions of Zahawi? Did Zahawi lie to him? Or was Sunak simply not asking these questions and not digging deeper and kind of turning a blind eye to the problem? And
yeah, because the question is kind of why were these issues not identified earlier on before these people get those types of positions? Those will be questions for the Prime Minister to look at. Let's look at the words of the former Prime Minister now. Front page of the Daily Mail, and Boris Johnson talks about this very long, most extraordinary call he had with Putin. We're going back to almost a year ago now, where Boris Johnson says that Putin said to him, "I don't want to hurt you, but with a missile, it would take only a minute." It is extraordinary to get the details, one side of the conversation here, that happened between these two men.
Well, it sort of sends a shiver down one's spine, I think, that story. But I think it also demonstrates the kind of patheticness of Russia and Putin, really, the fact that he felt the need to say that. I think strong countries that garner respect across the globe don't feel the need to make such threats because they have that respect and because other countries respect them. And I think it sort of shows the sort of patheticness of Putin, really. But it also sheds a light on how alarming and worrying it must have been for the leadership of the West in the run up to that conflict, and the potential fear that it could spiral out of control.
Because particularly at that time, Putin was denying any claims of an invasion. And of course, we've learnt that majority of what he said there, I mean, no surprise here, could not be trusted at all. Let's go back to the front page of the Times, if we can, Jack. And there's lots of sort of rumblings about what's to come on Wednesday. Lots of schools are going to be closed. Lots of families will have disruption, as striking teachers will mean that for many schools it's just not viable to open at all. Do you have sympathy or empathy with the teachers who've decided, actually, this is just not viable, we've got to go on strike?
So I can understand to an extent the claims of the teachers that their jobs have become increasingly difficult and their pay has stagnated. I think that's unquestionably true. But I think there is a bit of a problem where we hear from the NEU that teachers' pay has stagnated more than anybody else. But the issue is that every union is saying that. You know, every part of the public sector is saying, oh, well, we've been the most hard done by and we need the money and we need, a big pay increase, an inflation busting pay increase. And actually, we simply can't provide those pay increases to everyone. Somebody has to make the sacrifice. And I think also it's rather worrying at this time, given all the impact that COVID's had on learning, that teachers are choosing this point to strike and create more disruption for students, because that's going to have a really big impact, particularly on the students who are most vulnerable.
Yeah, we think the action on Wednesday is expected to affect more than 23,000 schools. Now, the Education Secretary is going to meet with leaders from the National Education Union and other teaching unions later on today. We'll keep you across that here on Times Radio. Of course, they could come to some kind of resolution which would stop the strikes on Wednesday. More on that across the day. Now, let's look inside the Mail if we can. And misery of leasehold set to end for millions. Look, Jack, housing really is your field more than mine. Explain. Michael Gove's made quite a lot of comments over the weekend, which could be good news for people who think, oh, my goodness, I've got no control of the costs that are mounting up for the property that I live in.
Yeah, so I think this is a really good thing, and it's a really good way of tackling some of the vested interests that are at play in the housing market, and saying that those who are leaseholders are sort of currently being almost scammed with big payments to fix problems with the buildings that they live in, huge ground rent charges. And Michael Gove is saying, he's described it as a feudal system that's outdated and needs to be broken, and saying that actually landowners can't keep putting all these ridiculous payments on the leaseholders, and that people need to have security and comfort in their properties. And I think that's a good thing.
Let's also talk about the comments that he made about what happened at Grenfell Tower. And for the first time, there's been an admission from the government that they were partly to blame.
Yeah, so he said that it's a sort of collective failure. So he said that that's sort of under the Conservatives, but also under Labour previously, that the advice on buildings was ambiguous and didn't effectively eliminate this type of situation from happening. The advice wasn't good enough, it wasn't clear enough, it wasn't tight enough, and the regulation was poor. I think it's good that he's admitted this, but it has taken a very, very long time for them to admit this. I mean, it's what, 6 years now, and it would have been nice if someone could have taken responsibility a bit sooner, but at least we got there in the end.
Now, it's Monday morning, so it's sort of very much back to work. And for anyone who's got kids at home, back to school, and maybe some homework was due over the weekend, and there's a story in the Times saying artificial intelligence software is so powerful that one school said teachers should abandon traditional homework essays because there are concerns that you might, if you were a savvy teenager, get artificial intelligence to write it instead of do it yourself. Are you the type of teenager that would have done that?
No, I was always far too scared of breaking the rules to have done that. But
who were you?
But it is
scared you might get caught out.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But I think this is a really interesting story, and it could potentially have some positives, because we know that exams and in-class tests are sort of less prejudiced against those who are more vulnerable and from poorer backgrounds, who don't necessarily have access to all the support that's required for coursework and at-home types of work. And I think we are going to see, both in schools and universities now, we are going to see work return to the classroom and a focus on exams over coursework. But also, hopefully, we'll be able to see the use of this AI in homework too. The deliberate, accepted use of this AI, saying, okay, we need to learn how to use these tools. Children need to learn how to use these tools. And actually, rather than having traditional tests, let's test children on the skills of the future. And actually, AI is going to be part of that. So we can't turn our backs on it completely.
Yeah, this school, it's a really interesting approach. Instead of getting kids to write an essay, what they're going to do is get them to do really in-depth research about a topic so they can come to the classroom ready to discuss it. Clearly, you can't blag that if, your artificial intelligence to do the work for you.
No, exactly. And but then again, I mean, I don't know if you tried using these artificial intelligence tools. I don't think they're at the point yet, really, where they are a massive concern. I think they may well be within the next few years, but right now I don't think they're sophisticated enough. I think there is an element of a moral panic here about the whole sector being in panic about AI taking over, and actually that's not necessarily entirely founded yet.
Jack, thank you very much. Finally, I'm just going to ask, does tidiness spark joy for you?
No, I've always been incredibly suspicious of people who enjoy tidying.
Well, Marie Kondo wouldn't be for you then. There is an admission which many people might think, thank goodness for this. I give up. Motherhood makes Kondo Fold, the tidiness guru. You'll remember her a few years ago, soared to popularity for sparking joy by tidying, and she has accepted that the minimalist lifestyle she preached is incompatible with having children. Now, having 3 children, I think she said it's too much. It makes me feel less guilty about being a little bit messy. I wonder if it does for you too. Jack, thank you very much for joining me to go through the papers. Really appreciate your time. Jack Rowlett, campaigner with the Pro Housing Group, Priced Out. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.